Hello and welcome to Policy Beast. On today's show, we'll have Brett Walker. He is running for the state representative seat that Tom Santacandro is vacating. It's the 7th Middlesex seat. It represents parts of Framingham and Ashland. But before we get into more about that seat and who's represented and all that good stuff, I'd like to welcome Brett Walker to the show.
Hi, Makita.
Hi, Brett. How are you?
Good. Hi, Ashland and Framingham.
Thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm gonna get started. Brett, why are you running for office?
Because the timing is right. This is not something I anticipated doing. This is not something I'd planned on doing. But when the opportunity became available and I examined the circumstances, I said, gee, this is really just the right time. And the reason I believe it's the right time is because as I look around, I see most of the most pressing matters in Massachusetts right now, and to some extent the nation, but most importantly Massachusetts. I happen to have a great deal of experience in almost all of them. Makita, if I'm asking you about what are some of the most pressing matters in Massachusetts, some of the things that most people might say, and perhaps you, but perhaps many people of Ashland, Framingham, and across Massachusetts might say things along the lines of criminal justice reform.
Sure.
Well, geez, yeah, I'm a prosecutor. This is what I do all day, every day, is I am about as deep in the criminal justice system as one can be.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that.
I hope to return to that.
You have a few other issues that you're concerned
Right.
about.
Well, so some of these other issues I'm looking at are things like public school education, empowerment.
Okay.
Listen, I've got one son that's in the Ashland Public Schools right now. I've got another one that, with God willing, will be in the Ashland Public Schools very soon. My wife is a public school teacher.
All right.
My mother was a teacher. My brother is teaching right now, albeit not at a public school.
Okay.
In fact, he's in Thailand. But the point is, there's a legacy of teaching in my family. I look at issues like the substance abuse and opiate addiction epidemic.
Yes.
These are things with which, once again, I have a great deal of experience. I run a specialty court, and I am immersed in this culture. Plus, I got to tell you, most of my prosecutorial work, as it is involved with counter-narcotics prosecution. So I'm very knowledgeable on the programs that exist, the programs that do work, the programs that don't work, and how we can best address these. I look at public transportation. Listen, for years and years, I've been riding the public transportation system every day. So while I don't have a whole lot of formal experience with it, I do ride these systems every day.
Right.
I was out there with the rest of Ashland and Framingham and everybody else along the Worcester line last year during the coldest winter I can recall. Standing out there, and the train comes and it slows down and it stops just long enough for the train conductor to stick his or her head out and say, sorry, no room, and then they just keep riding. And then, so what am I supposed to stand out there in -5? Shiver?
It's pretty brutal. Pretty brutal.
So first-hand knowledge about that.
But I want to do deep dives.
There's more reasons.
I want to do deep dives of this, but before we get too into the policy piece, I want to talk about you and your background.
Okay, right, I'm sorry.
Because I want to introduce Ashland and Framingham and our other viewers to who is Brett Walker. So, you mentioned a lot about your professional background, and I want to hear more about that. But I also want to hear about your personal background as well. So I guess my first question probably should have been, who is Brett Walker and why does he want to run for office?
All right, okay, so now, having readdressed the issue, all right, so who is Brett Walker? My name is Brett Walker. I'm Brett Walker. Yeah. I live in Ashland, and I have 2 great young boys, a great wife, and my family, most of my parents live out in San Francisco, out in the Bay Area, and I am currently a prosecutor. Prior to that, I was a Army officer, and to that extent, I remain an officer in the Massachusetts National Guard. I went to school at the United States Military Academy at West Point, and I commissioned into the infantry branch. I spent the next 5 years as a light infantry officer, mostly assigned to the 10th Mountain Division. I spent some time in Afghanistan and Iraq. Then I decided that I'd like to start a family. I'd like to be around more. I'll tell you, as a full-time soldier, I was gone all the time, even if not deployed to one of the combat theaters. I was out at a training exercise or I was out of school. I was just never home. So I wanted to try to start a family. I wanted to be home a little bit more. So I transitioned. I decided I would apply to law school and take take advantage of the very generous GI Bill benefit program. I was very fortunate that I got into law school in Massachusetts, so so the whole family moved up here, which is where my wife is from anyway, and we moved into Ashland. I attended law school, and at that time, I guess while I was applying to law school, I became a full-time National Guard soldier, so I was full-time National Guards for about a year, then transitioned to what we call M-Day, which is 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, although I'll tell you, Makita, I've never once done 2 weeks a year. It's always significantly more than that. Just this last year, I was in Germany for a whole month. The year before that, I was in South America for probably 2 months. And before that, I was in Kansas for, I'm sorry, not Kansas, Oklahoma, no, it was Kansas. It was Kansas. I'm sorry, it was Kansas. Okay. It was Kansas for a month. It was 3 years ago. But,
well, before you go any further with that, I do want to thank you for your service.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I got distracted.
And thank you for your military service to this country, very much so. And so I was going to ask you about public service, but this is, that's definitely the impetus. It seems of your wanting to do public service. It seems like it's an extension of some of the public service that you've already been doing through the military and other things, and as a prosecutor as well. So I guess why this particular realm of public service is appealing to you now is because you feel that there are some pertinent issues that we're facing here in the Commonwealth, and you feel that you can make a difference. So I want to dig deep into some of those issues that you brought up at the top of the show. And I think one thing that folks are very, very concerned with, and we talked a little bit about this before the start of the show, is the substance abuse and opiate abuse issue. And we've done several shows here on Policy Beast about that issue, how it's hit locally and nationally. But as some of your experience, you've seen firsthand the damage that this crisis has done. As state representative, how do you feel that you can address this issue and put it to the forefront of folks' minds and try to make a difference there? What's on your mind in that regard?
Well, you've asked me several questions, and thankfully I can loop them all together into one answer here, because you started talking about the public service entity.
Yeah.
And yes, I've been involved with public service as a soldier. I've been involved with public service as a member of my church and involved with charitable organizations, sitting on municipal boards, sitting on executive boards for clubs. There's lots of different ways in which one can serve. I've tried to do it as many ways as possible, and I still will continue. Serving as state representative is just yet another way, and the reason I think that I would be very well qualified for it, and the experience that I can bring for it is I'm a problem solver. I'm a problem solver, have been my whole life. I've started many organizations. I have improved many organizations, and we can get into all the details on that. I'm really happy to do that. Some of it's mentioned on the website, but it's things, it's things like starting specialty courts. It's things like when I was in Baghdad, I started an arts and culture show, because here we were trying to create a new Iraqi government. I was actually in charge of trying to stand up the southern Baghdad municipal government. We were trying to stand up a new Iraqi government and a new municipal government, but there was some question as to who are we now as Iraqis. I created this art and culture show, which allowed them to redefine their own culture. I've been involved with a lot of these like new initiatives, both in military, civilian, academia, and in the legal world. Which brings me to the most specific question with which you ended there, and what could I, if elected state rep, do to combat the opiate abuse or substance abuse in total? Because we can't narrow ourselves. Opiate abuse has been getting a lot of press. It has. Rightfully so. I mean, there's 4 people, on average, 4 people are dying every day in Massachusetts linked to opiate abuse.
Right.
Opiate abuse is terrible, but you know what? There's a lot of other substances being abused out there. How many homes have been torn apart by alcohol abuse? There's still a lot of other substances out there, Makita, that are being abused on a daily basis, and we can't consider these victimless crimes. I know a lot of people like to say a lot of times, oh, it's a victimless crime, what I do to my own. No. Right. Those who have been involved with any sort of substance abuse know that what happens all around you victimizes everybody around you, everyone who cares for you, your family, your friends, your employees. It puts the people with whom you work and interact, it puts them at risk, not only for their own safety, but for their own emotional well-being.
Right.
It's not a victimless crime. We have to stop seeing it that way. But likewise, there's no one golden solution to substance abuse. To study it is to understand the complexity of it. And everybody comes to substance abuse in very different ways and for very different reasons, and it's addressed in very different reasons.
Yes.
So it's very important that we make as many options for many programs. And the answer is not always money. I'm running as a Democrat, but I think one of the very important things you'll learn about me is that I'm fiscally responsible. And the answer to all of life's problems and all the Commonwealth's problems is not to throw more money at it, it's to get smarter.
Everything.
Yeah,
Still money in it.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not.
Okay.
It's not, right? We can work smarter on this as opposed to just throwing more money at it.
Okay.
Like, for instance, you know what? Here's one thing. This has been my firsthand experience with a lot of substance, and this isn't for everybody, but with a lot of substance abuse, the most important tool, the most important resource you can have is a mentor, is a sponsor. In the AA world, in the Alcoholics Anonymous world, we would call that a sponsor. There's also, of course, Narcotics Anonymous, which is a very similar program. But there are a lot of organizations out there that offer mentors, sponsors, people who have been there before, people to whom you can turn when you're feeling weak. And that is an incredible tool, and it's free because the people that are doing it for the right reasons are the people that are trying to pay it forward, people that went through a very dark period, who alienated everybody else in their life and lost their job, lost their home, and they've managed to turn it around. Now they've got it under control, and they want to pay it forward, and they want to bring someone else through it. Those are the most meaningful people. They're not looking for money. So that's one example. Another example, looking at employment opportunities. Oftentimes, people will turn to substance abuse when they don't feel that there's proper meaning in the remainder of their life. If you can give them good, meaningful work, that will give them something better to do than sitting around getting stoned all day. There is reuniting with family and the importance of creating good family integrity. You know, when you've got people out there that are caring for you and that are watching over you, that depend on you and that you depend on them, you're less likely to turn to the abuse of these opiates. Now, once again, none of these is true in every case. None of them are even true in half the cases. But what I'm saying is you need someone there who's been immersed in the culture, who understands this culture, who's seen what works and what doesn't work, and who can read the circumstances, and who can properly allocate resources, be they attention, be they notoriety, in some cases, be they funding, because yes, there's always an issue with being able to find a bed. That is to say, find an inpatient program that can address this. And detox, these detox programs, they're just, there's too few of them and they're too short.
Okay. And in your opinion, that diminishes their overall effectiveness?
I think that it limits the success that we could have if they were given more options.
I see. So that's something you'd be working towards as state rep?
Very much so. About creating partnerships. And like I said, it's not always about just, look, you know, we've got this finite budget. $29 billion for the Commonwealth. We've got this finite budget. Everybody's going to be up there hacking, asking, can I have this? Can I have that? I want to fund this. And certainly, as a state representative, that's a very important job. But you know what else an important job is? Is going out there and being a liaison for your issues. Going out there and creating the partnerships and explaining to people how, listen, this already exists. Your program or solution already exists. This issue already exists. Have we considered bringing this problem to your program? No additional costs, but maybe we can all work together on these things.
So making connections.
Making these connections, yes.
Okay. Yeah,
making these connections.
Sounds good. You rolled off a number of issues that you were passionate about. You're very passionate about this issue as well.
I'm passionate about most things, I think you'll find.
It certainly seems like it. But you did mention, I think you talked about education at the top of the show. You come from a family of educators. Your mother was a school teacher, your brother's teaching in Thailand, you know, and this is something that's near and dear to your heart. I could ask you about the overall importance of education in the Commonwealth and such, but specifically on the local level, what are some of the educational issues that you see facing some of the schools? And you used a very interesting phrase at the top of the show. You said to empower the public schools. What do you mean by that, and how does that fold into your overall policy vision for public school systems in Ashland and Framingham and the Commonwealth in general?
You know, the phrasing there was particular because I was reflecting on Mayor Walsh's State of the City address from yesterday.
Okay, yeah.
And there was some talk about charter schools. And
Right.
charter schools is a big movement in Massachusetts right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, sitting in this seat, from the perspective on which I examine this, I think that we are skating the issue here.
How so?
Because I think that what we ought to be doing is improving the public schools that we have as opposed to creating a whole parallel system.
Okay.
If there's a problem, fix it. Don't just skate around it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, when we
Some would argue, though, that the charter schools are that fix for the problem, and that people aren't skating around it, but that's how they're tackling the problem head on. I'm just playing devil's advocate
I agree.
here, but say that charter schools are a way for people to kind of think differently about approaching education, K through 12, and they should be allowed to operate, the different kinds of charter schools in the Commonwealth, and to operate and be experimental and figure out the best way to solve some of the problems that you're alluding to. What do you say to those who would say that?
Well, I think there's a place for charter schools.
Okay.
I think that we should continue to focus our efforts on improvements of the public schools. And I think to suggest that the public schools are incapable of experimenting with new educational techniques would be incorrect. I think that there's a lot of public schools out there. I think right here in Ashland, I'm not going to name any of the specific programs, but there are some. Well, okay, maybe I will. Like for instance, like neighborhood program that we do here in Ashland. There are plenty of experimental, progressive educational techniques that are being employed in the public school systems right now, so we can make progress. We can improve the school systems in the existing public schools. But there's also great importance of recognizing the strengths of the schools that we have right now and capitalizing on them to the greatest extent possible. And then there's other things. There's a lot of things that we hear a lot of people discuss about the public schools, and there's some things that I just don't hear people discussing enough.
Like what?
Well, this might be very particular, Brett, but one of the things I think about is and once again I'm going to use this term empowerment for teachers to exercise some maximum discretion not maximum, but more discretion in their own curriculums. I think that the teachers from each individual town understand the needs and the interests and the passions for the students that come through their class, and many of them have been teaching in the same class, same level, same school, same neighborhoods for many years, and they've developed effective techniques. And so I don't want the state to be imposing too many constraints on how it is that they teach those students and what it is they teach those students.
Okay.
Another particular thing that I don't hear people talking about very much, but paying to play sports in high school. Listen, athletic participation is a very important part of character development, which is really the goal of our schools, to build good people, to make good people. Educated people, yes, but also people of good character. And much character can be learned through athletics, teamwork, sacrifice,
Sure.
dedication, leadership. These are all very important things that can be learned through sports participation, and to put a financial burden on people for trying to attain those, to exercise those opportunities.
It shuts people out of that opportunity.
Yeah. And I know there's waivers, and I know there's scholarships, but
Okay.
that shouldn't even be a consideration. That should be part of your education.
That's near and dear to your heart, because you've been, we were talking before the show a little bit, you're very involved in a lot of sports. There's one particular sport that you're very involved in, and not to go out on a tangent, but maybe we should a little bit. So you were involved in rugby.
Yes. Well, I played, through my youth, I played football, and I loved it.
Okay.
And then when I got to, well, indeed though, I was aware of the existence of rugby, and indeed my junior year of high school I actually started a rugby club at my local, in my county. And that club still exists, and it's very strong to this day. So we are many years later, and it's still going strong. It's still a great program. So that was actually one of my first innovations, and I'll tell you, it's something I can look back on this day. And we started that program circa 1998, somewhere thereabouts. The Tam Union Highlanders, and that program is stronger today than it ever was before. So that's like one of my first, when I say I'm a problem solver and when I'm an innovator, there's one of the very first examples. So anyhow, I was aware, and I'd been playing rugby a bit. I'd really hoped to play football in college. I ended up going to a Division I school. I went to United States Military Academy at West Point, right? Division I football program, albeit terrible Division I football. My graduate school, by the way, is Boston College. So between Army football and Boston College football, I don't have a whole lot to look forward to each fall. So what I'm really thinking is, go Pats, because we got the Super Bowl. If I can just rely on I got nothing of the college route. All I got here is the Pats. All right, we got a playoff game coming up, right? Denver. But all right, so. Now I'm dating the show, though.
That's okay.
Oh, that game's already over.
Well, hopefully by the time this airs, we will have won the Super Bowl. And
yes, right?
I don't care what your political persuasion is. I think that's something that we could all get behind, as people of Massachusetts. But anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So when I showed up to college, I wasn't good enough to make a Division I football team. So I ended up going onto the rugby team. And the rugby team ended up being very much a collection of guys who hadn't made either the wrestling team or the football team. So it ended up just being a whole bunch of wrestlers and football players all coming together. We ended up being one of the very best teams in the country my entire time there. I was elected to the club as club officer both my junior and senior year, and I was Army Rugger of the Year my senior year, which was 2004. And I then played for some rugby teams in the Army while I was moving around the country, based in various places, mostly in the South with the Army. Then when I moved to Massachusetts, I started playing with the Worcester Rugby Club. Great group of guys, great, and gals. We got a women's club too.
Nice.
We got a high school team, a men's team, an old boys team, a women's team. We're very inclusive. And I was the captain of that team, and I sat on the executive board for a few years. And regrettably, my focuses now are more on family and my local Ashland, Framingham community, and certainly my work. But I haven't been playing a whole lot of rugby yet. But yes, it's something that's been a very important part of my life, and it's been a very important developer of my character and my leadership. I've learned a lot of leadership through. It's one thing to lead soldiers.
Right.
That's one form of leadership.
Yes.
It's one thing to lead staffs, which I've also done. That's another type of leadership. It's another thing to lead rugby players. It's another thing to lead volunteer boards. For instance, these last 4 years, I've been the chairman of the Ashland Democratic Town Committee, which is a group of very passionate people, all of whom have some very strong feelings on things, rightfully so. And that's good citizenship, is to have strong feelings about your government and the direction that your country's headed. But that's a very different form of leadership, and this is an all-volunteer board, and it's a very delicate, it's different than, say, leading soldiers. And finally, the leadership involved with raising a family. Once again, very different type of. I know you're raising a young family, as am I, right? That's a very different type of leadership.
It's a very different kind of leadership.
Leadership of a specialty court with which I'm involved.
I want to talk about that because we don't have a lot of time left. So
what?
No, we're rapidly running.
Can this be like a double session here, to be continued?
Well, we'd love to have you back and talk a little bit more. Absolutely, but I do want to talk a little bit about specifically what you're doing professionally for a little bit, and then I just want to wrap it up. So talk to me about the specialty court work that you've been doing and some of the criminal justice reform issues that you're concerned about.
Well, specialty courts, I think, is a very important part about criminal justice reform.
What is a specialty court?
All right, so this is a rather new movement. The specialty court with which I work and of which I'm one of the founders is a veterans court, and our court specifically takes in and addresses the criminal cases of veterans of the United States military who can trace the origins of their criminal conduct to military service in some way. This often manifests itself, people who have been wounded and got addicted to painkillers.
I see.
People who contracted TBI, traumatic brain injury. Once again, going back to the football thing, right?
Yeah.
And this is a big problem in the modern battlefield because, as many of us know, many of the casualties we're experiencing in principally Iraq, based on my experiences, principally in Iraq, a little bit in Afghanistan, but these roadside bombs, what we often call IEDs, improvised explosive device, and it's not always going to be the shrapnel that gets you, especially because we're wearing body armor and helmets. Sometimes we're riding in Humvees. It's not always going to be that shrapnel that gets you. Maybe the concussion that comes through, and it might rattle your brain a little bit. You get these traumatic brain injuries, and you might not recognize any of the symptoms, and the symptoms might not onset until much later. And then like adjustment disorder, like a general adjustment disorder. Take me. I joined the military. I first suited up in uniform at age 18. Stayed in full-time capacity for about the next 10 years. Between being a cadet, soldier, full-time guardsman, full-time soldier, full-time guardsman, and all that kind of stuff. So here you've got the ages between 18 and 28.
Right.
Full-time soldier, that was the culture in which I was immersed. And to all of a sudden be thrown into a civilian culture and a civilian society, things are different. And I was very fortunate and that I was able to make good adjustment, but I saw many battle buddies to my left and my right not make as good adjustment, not make as clean adjustments. So anyhow, the specialty court with which I'm involved addresses those kinds of people. There's also mental health courts for people who fall into that weird crevice between not competent. They are technically competent to stand trial in as much as they understand the trial proceedings, but they are not so cognizant of their circumstances and capable of controlling their behavior that it's really fair to prosecute them properly. That's a mental health court. Yeah. There's also drug courts for people who have very specific drug addiction ailments, and the advantage here is you've got special judges, special probation officers, special prosecutors, and special social workers assigned to each session who are trained and experienced and knowledgeable on how to address the very specific problems of these people, as opposed to the normal trial session where you're going to have the judge, the prosecutor, the probation officer, who one day they're doing it operating under the influence, an OUI driving case, and the very next day they're having a domestic assault and battery case. They're very different circumstances led to these people ending up in the criminal justice system. They're all going to get the same justice, as opposed to a specialty court where people are trained to recognize the very specific things that are needed.
Right. So we're almost out of time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have covered a lot of ground here, Brett. I want to thank you for joining us, but I want to ask you one last question. And we'll have to keep it kind of short, but for people watching, why should they vote for Brett Walker?
I'm not even asking for their vote right now. What I'm asking for is come get involved in the campaign. Research me, and that will give you your answer right now. Go visit my website, www.electbrett.us. Go to the Facebook account. Come to some of my events. We're going to have our campaign kickoff on February 5th, Friday. It's going to be family friendly. Bring the family, bring the kids. Listen, come to get to know me. Come get to know the people that are working with me and supporting me. And that will give you the opportunity to understand why, come September and November, I'll be asking for your vote. But the answer, if we had to put it into one sentence, is this. Because this ain't your typical campaign. I'm not your typical candidate. I didn't rise through the ranks the way a typical candidate would. I'm coming in here with excitement, with energy, and with a wealth of experiences and perspectives, the likes of which no one else can match.
Brett, thank you so much for joining us here on Policy Beats. We covered a lot of ground, like I said. We're going to have you come back so we can cover some more ground later on. Will you come back and talk with us a little bit more?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thanks again.
Thanks, Akita.
Thank you.